Welcome to another episode of Founders Club. Today we're going to be talking to John Bianchi. He is the founder of STR Search, and he is an expert at using data to find highly profitable short-term rentals. In this episode, we're going to break down everything that you need to know to find, manage, and price your short-term rental for maximum profits. If you have any questions, make sure you put them in the box down below. As always, make sure you check out the links in the description. And if you like money and you like real estate, hit that subscribe button because this is the show for you. I'll see you on the inside. Welcome to Founders Club, the show for real estate entrepreneurs. All right, John, welcome to Founders Club. Really appreciate you being on today.
I appreciate you having me.
Cool, man. So one thing I was really excited to chat with you about today is obviously, you're very experienced in the Airbnb short-term rental space in terms of finding profitable rentals, finding profitable markets, things like that. So I'm excited to jump in and talk all things short-term rental. Let's dive right in and let's talk about what is like step one when analyzing a short-term rental or finding a market.
Yeah. Regulations has nothing to do with data. Make sure you got good regulations, right? And don't waste a second analyzing a market unless you know what the regulations are, because otherwise it's just a giant waste of time. Step two, though, is what I refer to as the 20% rule. So it's not cash on cash. I just want to stress that because everyone hears cash on cash when I talk about this 20% rule. That's not the case. It is the price to rent ratio. Or in other words, the how much did you buy it for? How much does it make on an annual basis? If I bought it for $500,000, if it makes $100,000 a year on an annual basis, the revenue is 20% of the purchase price. And if you can find a property that has that potential, there is a really good chance it's going to make the amount of profit that you would be happy with, right? You could find one that's less and it could still make you happy, but if you're around that 20%, you're going to be in a good mood, right? And that's sort of the rule that I like to use to determine if a market is worth deep diving or not. Because when I analyze the market, like Austin, I've analyzed a couple of times now. It takes me almost a week to fully understand Austin, right? All the nook and crannies of Austin. And so I don't want to waste time studying an entire market that has zero potential to be, to have cash flow. And I always focus in on cash flow because that's the real differentiator between a long-term rental and a short-term rental, right? So if you can buy a cash flow and it cash flow, or sorry, if you can buy an Airbnb and it cash flows, you still get all the other benefits of owning real estate, right? So it's like, well, let's hyper focus in on that then. And so how do you go about determining if a market meets a 20% rule or not? There's a lot, like if you're going into Austin, once again, if you're going into Austin, there's so much data. There's like, I don't know exactly how many listings, but there's thousands and thousands of listings. So it's a lot, right? And so what you want to do is narrow that down as much as you possibly can to a smaller subset. And then within that subset, you're trying to find a pattern, and that pattern will help you know if it's possible or not. Okay, so let me give an example. Let's use Scottsdale, Arizona. Between Scottsdale and Phoenix, there's 35,000 listings. Okay, so let's narrow that down as much as possible. So let's go pretending we're just going to look at downtown Scottsdale, and in downtown Scottsdale, we will just look at the 4 bedrooms in downtown Scottsdale that have a pool and that aren't luxury homes, but they're also not like rundown homes, right? And we're looking on AirDNA at properties that meet that criteria. So you can hyper focus into this little area and grab just those 4 bedrooms with a pool that are regular looking listings or homes, sorry. And then from there, you'll be able to start to see that each of those homes tend to make a certain amount, right? It's not like there's this gigantic difference between one and the other because it's 2 products that are essentially being sold that look very similar from one to the other, right? And so then they end up making roughly the same amount of money because that's what the market allows for. And so what you end up seeing is this pattern in the data where you'll have like 10 different listings that all look very, very similar with the same sort of size of a property, the same quality of photos and marketing. They all have pools and they all have the same amenities. And so it's very, very similar. And all of a sudden, they're all roughly making the exact same amount of money. And let's say that amount that they're making is $100,000, right? You now know what the properties can roughly make. And so now what you have to do is head over to Zillow. And on Zillow, you need to go look at the downtown of Scottsdale, and you need to look at the 4 bedrooms that have a pool that are not luxury and see if any of them are being sold for 500,000. And if you can see that either there's homes on the market right now that have sold for 500,000 or selling for 500,000, or if there are properties that have sold in the last 6 months for roughly 500,000. And if you can see that, that's telling you that there's cash flow potential within that market. And by the process I just walked you through, you could do that in less than a half an hour for the 4 bedrooms in downtown Scottsdale, right? And if it doesn't end up working out, go look at the 5 bedrooms. Go look at the 3 bedrooms. Go look at the 6 bedrooms. Go look at the homes without the pools. Go look at North Scottsdale. Go look at South Scottsdale, right? Like keep moving around until you can find that. And then if you can find it, that's where you go, okay, now I need to like deep dive this market to truly understand what drives revenue and what is the most optimal thing to purchase to drive the most amount of revenue.
Okay, cool. So what I'm hearing is the 20% rule, and I'm hearing regulations. And let me take a half step back do you start with regulations?
Yes.
And if so, what are you looking for and how do you find it?
Okay, so regulations is definitely where you start. And again, the reason being is because if a market does not allow for Airbnbs in the first place, there's zero reason to start looking at the data because what's the point of operating an illegal business, right? It just doesn't make any logical sense. So if the market does not allow for it, don't open up an Airbnb there. San Francisco is a really good example. They only allow you to rent out the homes for 30 days at a time, not one night at a time. And so then therefore, if you were to open up an Airbnb on a nightly basis, you would be running an illegal business and you eventually get shut down, and it would be a really stupid investment in the first place because the regulations told you flat out you can't do this, right? And you will eventually get caught or you won't be able to sell it and all these different things. And so then therefore don't do it. And that applies to a lot of different areas. Now, other areas such as San Diego has regulations that they have put in place, and they said, listen, you can do it, but here are our rules. Follow our rules and you're good to go. Which, by the way, is the exact same as every other business that exists in the entire world. And so at least in America. And so if there are rules, you play by the rules, you pay your taxes, and everybody's happy, right? So San Diego, they have a registration system. They cap it at like 8,000, I want to say, or something around that number. And once they get 8,000 people who have registered, they're not going to hand out any more license to anybody, right? Which is what's actually crazy is that there's thousands of listings in San Diego that still have not registered. And there's more listings that exist than the 8,000, but yet there's still room to open up a listing and get it on the list and be one of those registered legal ones. And I find that super, super fascinating. Because of anyways, without getting too deep into it, but that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a place that has rules in place, because if you go to another place that has no rules in place, and then they decide that they're going to put rules in place because they got fed up with bad guests and more so bad hosts, then you're screwed, right? Because now you've bought something and now you're at a point where you're not grandfathered in and you're kicked out. And so look for a place that has regulations in place that says you have to play by rules, play by their rules, and you'll be good to go.
And what is the way to go about doing that? Are you thinking to yourself, oh, I'd like to have an Airbnb in San Diego or in Big Bear or in Florida or wherever, and then looking it up? Or are you looking up for places that are most friendly to Airbnbs and starting there? And then how are you finding that information? Hey there, I just have a quick favor to ask. If you're getting value from Founders Club and you're watching on YouTube, just give us a like, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. These things are free to do, and it really helps the channel. And it also helps us be able to bring better guests for you in the future. Now back to the episode.
The easiest way is you're interested in San Diego. Then go to Google, type in San Diego Airbnb regulations. You just put the name of the place, Airbnb regulations, and the very first link is almost always going to be the Airbnb Help Center, where they have curated the regulations for that specific area and backlinks to usually the government website where they talk about it. So that's like one
Oh,
of the,
nice.
yeah, that's one of the
Yeah.
first things you can do. Then all the links underneath are going to have the news that talks about it, which kind of puts it in layman terms, which is where I like to go. Then you go straight to the government website. But my hands down absolute favorite is just call in City Hall. Say who's in charge of the, who's the go-to person to talk about Airbnb regulations. Usually the zoning person, they put you in contact. You say, hey, I want to play by your rules. Just tell me your rules. And they tell you the rules. And then you're pretty well good to go from there. So that's one way. You can, the regulations on a market by market basis are extremely scattered. And there's no like central website where you can go to. Now, people have tried, it's okay, but it's not really all that great. And so there's not really like a go-to list of places with very favorable regulations. And there's just like a list. And it's like, okay, pick one of these off the list and go search there. So usually just you're interested in a place, you look up the regulations, and then you go from there.
I like that. No, that makes it easy enough. I think that's great. And then what are things that would be a red flag for you when picking a market? Obviously, like a 30-day minimum, would make it kind of a bust for short-term rentals.
Yep.
What are some other red flags that you would want to avoid?
Uh, well, in some places they just say like flat out you can't do it at all. Other places they say you can do it for 180 days, but you can't for the other half of the year. Um, um, the like without getting to the exact of this rule is what I would try to avoid. There is a one major red flag that I try to look for. That's really hard to gauge, but sometimes you could just, you have that gut feeling and. So, um, does the do the people that live within the market hate Airbnbs? That's one of the easy indicators, right? So Palm Springs is a great example of this. For whatever reason, I've never been there. I don't live there, so I don't know. But the people of Palm Springs hate Airbnb. They hate it. They have been trying for so long to get Airbnb out of Palm Springs. Even though there's so many motels, maybe that's why they have so many motels. They have so many other things, but they're just not a fan of it at all. And so what you've seen is they put regulations in place. Then they made them a little bit more strict. Then they made them a little bit more strict. Then they made them a little bit more strict, right? And they're just going to keep doing that, and making it harder and harder and less favorable, and adding more taxes until people just give up and they go, well, I'm just going to sell my property. I'm going to turn it into a long-term rental. And so they're not saying you can't do it, but they're just going to get to the point where you literally, it makes no sense to do it. And so what I would look for is, do the people within that market hate Airbnbs? Does the government keep adding more regulation to this? Have they shown to do that? And if those are the cases, then just try to avoid those places, right? Like it's not worth it in the long run, kind of, in my opinion. Also,
Yeah.
another good red flag, just be I'm Canadian, so I can say this: blue states versus red states. You know what I mean? There's a higher likelihood in a blue state that you're going to get more regulated in comparison to a red state. And so if that is your major concern, just keep that in mind.
Okay, I like that. Some good tips there. And then circling back to the 20% rule. So now we've identified a market. It seems to be Airbnb friendly. Now we're going to execute the 20% rule. So are we just going on AirDNA, kind of running the numbers, and then going to Zillow and finding what properties are selling for, and then basically just finding those 20% markets within a market?
Correct. Yep. You nailed it. Yeah. You head over to AirDNA. You narrow down the data. In other words, you make it a smaller subset. You can use filters to do that. You figure out what the average is that people are making. You see if on Zillow that there's properties that meet the 20% rule based off of this annual revenue you now know. And if you can see that, that's a really, really, really good sign. Because the reason this is helpful is because what happens in a market where the 20% rule is not met is there are no homes for sale. And you just instantly go, oh, you're like, oh, okay, there's nothing here. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to keep searching. Like there's very clearly no homes that I could buy. And then because you can add a filter to Zillow as well, where you say the max I'll pay is 550,000. Show me everything 550,000 and below, and then nothing pops up. And you go, okay, I get it. And then you go like, all right, let me put up to 800,000. They obviously start showing up and you're like, okay, well, that's not going to work. So anyways, yeah, you nailed it.
Love it. Okay, cool. And then what about like property types? Are there any that are preferred over the other, like single family versus condos versus anything else? What have you seen?
So it's going to depend on the market for sure. However, I have a hyper focus on single family homes over condos. And my reasoning is due to trying to like I see Airbnb as a business. And in business, the objective is trying to outperform your competition to be able to secure the bookings and be able to make money. And with a condo, you just have very limited ways to be able to make your listing significantly better than the your neighbor in that condo, because you're just restricted to a bedroom, bathroom, living room, dining room, and kitchen. But with a single family home, you can have a backyard. And in that backyard, you can have a pool, a pickleball court, a mini putt, a jungle gym, a fire pit, and all these different things. And now all of a sudden you have a mini resort, whereas the your neighbor doesn't. And so then therefore it makes your business more desirable in comparison to the your neighbor's business and your competitor's business. And that is what intrigues me more, because I think it makes for a better long-term investment.
No, it's a good point. It's more customizable if you have a single family home in terms of what you can do and all of
Yeah.
those types of things. So on that note, like what are some of the like amenities and design features that you look for or look to add that, make it more profitable for you as an owner?
So every market's going to be a little different. And this is where, it's the question I get all the time. What amenities should I add to my Airbnb listing? And then my response is like, well, it depends. Like where is your listing, right? If you have a listing in the Keys of Florida, it probably doesn't make sense to add a hot tub because it's already really hot down there. You don't need a hot tub. But if you're up in Michigan, it probably makes sense to add a hot tub, right? And so the market will determine what the amenity should be, partially. However, the greatest way to think about it is more so which demographic is going to be coming to my Airbnb. Is it going to be families, bachelorette groups, bachelor groups, weddings? You know what I mean? Like, what is it that what's the demographic? Who's coming here? And then what you
Yeah.
could do is create an experience for that group. And the easiest way to explain this is, if you were to be creating a place for a bachelorette group and you made the entire place pink, you painted the outside of the house pink, the inside of the house pink, you added pink furniture, you added pink neon lights, you did everything pink, you would not add a jungle gym to that backyard. It wouldn't make any logical sense, right? Because it's not for kids. And so then therefore, when you're creating these Airbnbs, you got to think, who's my demographic? And then you craft an experience for them. And the amenities is what helps craft it along with the design. Make
Yeah,
sense?
I love that. I think that's huge. That's one thing we talk about all the time on the channel is really understanding your customer avatar and then designing your business, your pitch, your offer around what would appeal to that customer avatar. So to your point, if you're in a ski resort market, you're going to want to add the hot tub and the saunas and the things like that. And on the opposite side, to your point, if you're designing for bachelorette parties, you're not going to add a kids room or different things like that, or a basketball court, things
Right.
like that. Or
Yep.
if you're in an active lifestyle market, you might put a pickleball court or any of those types of things.
Yes, exactly. And it's this one line that stuck with me for a very long time. If you market to everybody, you market to nobody. And by creating marketing to one specific group, you create like an experience for them that's just above everybody else. And I think my hat that I'm wearing right now is like a great example of that, right? I'm not, for people who are listening, the hat that I'm wearing is called Dad Gang, right? And it's this brand that dads created for dads. It's not going to hit every single last person out there, but it's for a certain type of dad that likes these types of things and they just want to, represent being a dad and enjoy being a dad. And so then therefore this hat is perfect for them. And it's perfect for me, right? But it's not going to be perfect for everybody. But I love this hat more than I like all of my other generic hats because it just is, it hits me perfectly. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally agree. I think just designing the experience will help you. Your listing will stand out. You'll get more bookings. You'll get more repeat bookings. All of those types of things if you really build it around that what that customer is looking for.
Yeah.
What
Definitely.
about like budgeting and how much you should spend on, customizing the experience, furnishing the unit, things
Mhm.
like that? Like we're talking about the 20% rule and what the property costs versus what it rents for. What are you allotting for furnishings and experience enhancers?
Yeah. And it's going to be dependent again. But I'll give some examples and like the logic we use behind this. So, as just to throw some numbers out there to kind of show how crazy this can be, we helped a client be able to acquire a property in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is extraordinarily competitive nowadays. And but it still can work if you have the money to make it work. Is the best way to put it. We have a client who's spending $750,000 between the down payment and the renovation and the amenities. And a huge chunk of that is going towards the amenities. Like the home was a $1.8 million purchase. They put 20% down, and the rest is going to amenities, right? Which in design. And so, like, it's going to be an absolute killer of a place. And it may sound crazy to a lot of people to invest into something like that because when you buy a hot tub, it's a depreciating asset, but you're creating more of a business that creates cash flow. And as long as you can continue to bring in enough revenue from that property, you're still cash flowing and creating a good cash on cash, even though you put so much money towards amenities, right? So that's the first piece. So that's like the extreme example. But then there's, I'm looking to buy a property for myself. I'm looking to partner with somebody. It's a tiny little one bedroom A-frame. It's already furnished. We maybe we'll put $20,000 into it, right? Because we're strategically buying a small furnished property and we're adding, like, the biggest thing will be a hot tub. That'll cost us $10,000, and then the other half will go towards other stuff, right? So there's like two extremes to this. But the way you need to think about it is you got to figure out, what is my competition doing? Like, because that's all that matters, because you're trying to secure the bookings over them. And if you can't create a space that is better than theirs, you're not going to be able to make as much as them, more than them, or secure bookings during a recession when stuff comes down, right? And so what we do is we'll look into a market, we'll study it, and we'll figure out what the revenue drivers are. Okay, so if I were to have a pool heater, does that help drive more revenue? If I had a hot tub, if I have a pickleball court, we kind of list off all these things that are like key things that you can clearly see in that market are driving revenue for the properties that do have them. And then what we do is we create this list and we go, okay, if we were to have all of these, it's going to cost us $100,000 extra to put them all in. And then you just simply underwrite it, right? You go, okay, well, if I have all these things, I can make $150,000 a year. I'm buying the property for X. I'm putting this much in. I'm going to make 150,000. All of my expenses work out to Y, and my cash on cash is 20%. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, that sounds good. Then it makes sense. However, if you do all of that and you realize that the revenue potential you can make out of it is like 75,000, and you're going to lose money, then why would you do it, right? So it all comes down to underwriting, right? If you really like for underwriting, you really like, looking at the numbers, you can buy, you can allocate $750,000 to one individual property and still walk away with profit if it all makes sense, right? You're not wasting the money, you're just building a business.
I totally agree. And what other tips do you have around underwriting the deal to make sure that, it's going to be a highly profitable property? Obviously, the 20% rule we talked about, but how are you factoring in other expenses, maintenance costs, maybe like seasonality, different
Yeah.
things like that?
Yeah. So, um, underwriting was one of these things that kind of was elusive to me before I just started doing it, right? I was like, all this magical underwriting thing that everyone talks about. And then I just started underwriting and I realized I was just plugging in numbers. You know what I mean? Like, you're just putting a number in there, and then it pops out a number at the bottom, and it's like, is that good or is that bad? And then that's where the interpretation of it is dependent on your situation, right? So when you say, like, how are you underwriting these deals to make them work out? We're not underwriting them to work out. We're more so just um, we're analyzing the revenue potential of the property to then figure out if it could work or not, right? And by work, I mean like how much cash flow, how much cash on cash can we expect from this? And is that number a number that we're happy with? And
Yeah.
if it is, then therefore it works out, right? So it's that forecasting of the revenue that is the trickiest part in the entire Airbnb industry, because with all other, maybe not all other, with most other real estate, especially long-term rentals, right? You just look at if you have a 2 bedroom, you look at your neighbor who has a 2 bedroom, they're renting it out for $2,000. Therefore, you're going to make $24,000 a year. You're done, right? There's nothing else that you have to do. Whereas with Airbnbs, there's so many factors that come into play, which is why I have a business doing this in the first place, because there's so many factors. As an example, we have 2 properties in Scottsdale that are down the street from each other. One, they both have these like mega resort backyards, right? They got the pickleball court, the pool, the putting green, the bowling alley, the you name it, they've got it all back there. Now, one has a smaller backyard, but the layout like flows beautifully. When you look at it from a drone shot down below, it's like this painting, right? And then when you see this other one that the layout of all of the amenities are kind of scattered, it just doesn't look good. And that listing has more amenities. So it has more amenities, but a worse layout. And it makes $80,000 less than the other one, right?
Wow.
So not $80,000, $80,000 less, meaning this one is making, the other one's making like $250,000 and that one making $80,000 less. So and it's insane because it's just the flow of it is something that when people look at it, it just looks so beautiful. They just kind of fall in love with it. And then there's the interior is really well done too, but it's mainly that backyard that kind of pulls people in. So when we talk about like, well, how are you making these deals work when you're underwriting? It really comes down to what do we think this is going to look like at the end of the day when it's like live, and then does that compete against what currently exists, and can it make the same amount or more or less than what currently exists, and then you can just plug in the numbers and it's good or bad.
Okay. And then what would you say is like a target, like net profit on a good deal for you? Like what's the sweet spot?
So we've just to throw a little credibility out there, we've found 210 plus properties at this point. And what we find on average is a 10% on the low end, 8 to 10 on the low end, and a like 18 to 20% on the high end. And what that means, why we have a low and a high, is because there needs to be a range of revenue and not an exact dollar amount of what you could expect to make. So if we're projecting the revenue on a property, if we use that, Scottsdale downtown home as an example, we said 100,000. But if I were to underwrite that, I would say 80,000 to 120,000. And I would look at it from that entire range to figure out if it would be worth moving forward with or not. And we always say if we're happy on that worst case scenario, which would be that 80,000, then everything above that is just a cherry on top. So we are able to find again 8 to 10 on the low and 18 to 20 on the high fairly consistently. We have again 210 plus properties. Every single last one of them has been profitable.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's a strong range, and I like the way you're looking at it in terms of low end, high end, and as long as you're happy with the low end, everything above that is gravy.
Exactly. Yep. And a lot of people do the opposite, and I think that gets them in a lot of trouble. I've seen it quite a few times, unfortunately.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on like capacity and maxing out capacity, adding beds, all of that? Because I know you definitely want to add more beds to get more people in, but there's also a point where it kind of goes too far and you're kind of creating like a overkill environment. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on the sweet spot for capacity? Hey, real quick, we are growing our nationwide real estate team and we are looking for agents and brokers who want to be a part of it. To learn more, visit 100commissionrealestate.com. That's the number 100commissionrealestate.com, or send me a message on any of my social media accounts. Links in the description below, and we'll look forward to talking to you. Now back to the episode.
So there's definitely data to prove that the heads and beds strategy helps drive more revenue. Meaning, if you have a 4 bedroom, can you shove 20 people in there? It's going to drive more revenue, right? Because more people can split the bill. Is it an Airbnb that you want to run? Most likely not, because the people who end up staying at that property are notoriously bad. It just, that's one of the worst case scenarios, is that type of person, or sorry, that type of group that's looking for that. I think, like, yes, it can drive more revenue, but there's a limit, and again, it's going to be market dependent. It's going to be property dependent, right? Should you go into the middle of downtown Austin and have a 40 plus person house that is a complete party house? No, like, it's going to be, you know what I mean? The neighbor's going to lose their mind. But can you buy a cabin that's out in the middle of nowhere with 10 plus bedrooms and shove 40 people in there? By all means, go for it, right? Like, that's the spot to do it. And maybe that's what makes, where it makes more sense. So
Yeah.
it really does depend. But I mean, these like, there are still people that do it where you look at the listing and it doesn't look like a good listing, but it can sleep 20 people in a 4-bedroom home. And you just, it is like doing decent revenue, but you look at it and you're just like, who wants to manage that, you know? So anyways, it's just not ideal.
So heads in beds is good, but make it kind of match the market and match the customer avatar.
Yeah, just don't like overdo it.
Yeah.
You know when you're overdoing it, right? But there is that sort of sweet spot where it makes sense.
Okay. Cool. Um, and then what tips do you have for creating the listing and kind of helping your listing stand out?
Okay, so I I talk about this all the time. I may be the data person, but I might as well be the photography person, because I don't know how to do it myself, but all I talk about is photos, I feel like, because it drives revenue so well. Like, it helps you get bookings so well. And the more creative and more strategic and more artistic you are with the photos, the better the listing tends to do. And so if you just, if you're like, hey, I want to be higher in the rankings, I want to be able to get occupancy, I want to be able to get booked, like, I want to be able to compete in this market. If you just hyper focused on the photos after, figuring out how to set it up properly, and instead of like, what should my title be or what should my description be, if you just hyper focus on those photos and try to make them the best that they possibly could, and even if you had to spend $2,000 to get the best of the best photographer out there, it's worth every penny. And so, it's extraordinarily hard for me to explain everything you need to do with photos, but what you want it to look and feel like is that it's straight out of a magazine. And if you can picture a photo of a home, the interior, the exterior, the backyard, that the way it looks in a magazine, make that happen on your Airbnb listing, it'll change your Airbnb listing like you won't believe. So photos are without a doubt the most important thing. Nothing else even comes close when it comes to doing that. Obviously, you got to price it properly, not overprice and things like that. And that's a whole other rabbit hole. But yeah, that's the general gist of it.
Yeah, no, I'll totally second that. On my Airbnb, we spent, I want to say it was over $1,000 on photography, which I thought was just absolutely insane at the time. But to your point, like when I got the photos back, I was just blown away. Like he had like color edited the sky and the ocean and just made the whole place like really pop. And
Yeah.
so now when people are flipping through and half of the listings have like iPhone pictures that are out of frame and just not just kind of like basic photos, and you come to our listing and it's just stunning. It's just a great way to stand out, and to your point, like it's worth every penny.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah. And then in terms of your pricing strategy, um talk to me about that. Are you trying to be the low price leader? Like when you're looking at the deal and the numbers, are you trying to be on the lower end, or is it based on how are you looking at that?
No, that never on the low end. I think that's a losing strategy. We're always looking to figure out how can we create more value to be able to make more money, right? So we can see all of our competitions making $100,000. They provide a pool and a fire pit. It's like, okay, cool. What if we did those same things, but we also added all the other stuff I've been saying over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And now I've got so much more that I'm selling on a nightly basis in comparison to my competition. So therefore, I should be worth more money. right? You're buying a pickleball court, you're buying a hot tub, you're buying a sauna, you're buying whatever, but you're getting it all for those couple nights, right? Whereas my competition is not doing that, and they're priced at X amount, so I'll be a little bit higher, and people buy it. Now, here's the thing: what if they don't buy it? Well, then you just lower your prices to the price of the competition that you're going up against, and you will get booked over them because you're selling way more for the exact same price, right?
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Great
it
way to look at it.
exactly, and the that worst case scenario, that's like the example I just explained, where your competition has a pool and a hot tub, and it's like, okay, they're making $80,000 a year with a pool and a hot tub. I'm gonna have way more than that, and my worst case scenario is that I'm gonna price the same as them, and I'll be able to get bookings over them because my property is better, right? And so that's how you make that worst case scenario a reality, is that you just have something so much superior that you price at the exact same amount, but ideally try and get it higher if you can, because you're giving them more.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, that's great. And then what about those like pricing tools that kind of like
Hmm.
adjust your pricing and stuff like that? Do you recommend using those, or how do you
Yes.
manage your rates?
Without a doubt, use them. Price Labs is the go-to. Uh, the Airbnb host community, like the people who are very, very, very active, will always love seeing their competition not using those tools. It is like one of those things where they just look at it and they'll kind of laugh a little bit and be like, "Oh, yeah, we got them." You know what I mean? Like, "Oh, this, I mean, this is my competition," kind of deal. Because the fluctuating prices, the fluctuating nightly rates, the fluctuating minimum nights that you can create, the different rule sets that you can create in there, the change, like how quickly they can change, all of those things help like you wouldn't believe, because um there is a time frame where the max amount of demand is looking to book a home. So as an example, uh like February, March, April, people are booking for July and August,
Mhm.
right? Because they're trying to secure their spot. Now, if you have like a really big home, that means that there's a lot of people who are going, and they have to plan that well in advance, right? And so they're going to plan it well in advance and be needing to secure their spot because they can't leave it to the last minute, whereas like one person could, like if it was just one person going. So this huge group is like planning 6 months in advance, and so then therefore you got to make sure you're pricing that property 6 months in advance as strategically as possible, because that is when the July Saturday night is in peak demand, and it's not the month prior, right? So depending on the size of the property. So like using that logic and reverse engineering that, and then trying to make sure you're priced the best possible way against your competition during a time frame like that, it's just it gets strategic. It's I think I don't know for sure, but I've always hyper focused on just the Airbnb data, not the pricing data. But I feel like I'm going to get more and more and more into pricing as time goes on, because we're seeing an absolute unlock in what people are able to make on their properties when they actually hire professionals to do it rather than just doing it themselves. And it seems like one of these like no brainers. So yeah, it's a gigantic deal to know how to do that, or to hire somebody who knows how to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And you said Price Labs was the tool you recommend?
Yeah, Price Labs is the go-to tool that you can plug your listing into, like connect your listing to, and it's a software that helps you do it. Can't stress this enough. If you don't know what you're doing in there, it's going to be probably worse off, right? So, like look up some videos on YouTube, try to learn what you can to actually get in there and do it properly.
Yeah. And the other cool thing about those tools is, not only does it help you get top dollar, but it'll also lower the price to get, last minute bookings. If you have a
Oh,
few nights that haven't booked and it's getting to be close to that date, it'll lower the price to try to entice people in there. So that
exactly.
way, you're not, you have less vacancy.
Yeah, that, and it'll also do things where if you're okay with a one night stay, but it being like due to a calendar issue. So, you have somebody who books up the first half of the week, the other half of the week, but they left Thursday open. You know what I mean? Like Thursday didn't get booked, but you typically do a 2-day booking. that software will automatically turn that into an available one night booking. And so now somebody can grab that one night, they drop the price, it comes very competitive, and somebody gobbles it up real quick, right? So yeah, it's super interesting.
Awesome. Cool. Well, as we wrap up here, well, any other tools that you recommend that we should be using to maximize our short-term rental profits?
Uh, there's a tool called Rank Breeze, which helps you see exactly what your competition is priced at on a night by night basis.
Okay.
And now I believe you can do this in Price Labs as well, but Rank Breeze is the one that I looked into and used. And in other words, if I know exactly, like if you think about it from a guest perspective, the guest goes and looks for a property. And when they are going to do that, they're going to see a handful of properties as their options, and yours is one of them. And there's some others that are directly competing against you. And the guest has to decide which one makes more sense to get, right? And so if your home is priced at $1,000 and all these other ones are priced at $500, but you're not worth twice as much, then you're never going to get booked. And so what I always like to do is to just be able to see exactly what they're priced at on that night for every single night of the year, and then figure out if I should be slightly above the exact same or slightly below them. And then therefore, when the guest is actually looking at all these properties, they're very competitive. And one of the easiest ways to explain this, it's like bags of chips in a grocery store aisle. You can see exactly how much every single one is when you're just standing there looking. There's no difference for a potential guest looking at an Airbnb. They're seeing all their options and all the prices directly in front of them. So if you're priced way out of whack, you're just not going to get booked.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that was Rank Breeze?
Yes.
Rank Breeze. All right, cool. All
Yeah.
right, and then one final question I always like to wrap with is in 60 seconds or less, what does it take to find and manage a highly profitable short-term rental?
It takes persistence to understand the data and understand what works. And if you just start with that, you can avoid buying a bad deal that you eventually have to sell and lose a lot of money from. Don't worry about the managing the guests, just understand the data. And it takes time, persistence to build that skill, to understand what you're looking at, get over that hump of that new skill learning curve where you feel like you're an idiot, get past that, and then you will figure it out, and that'll stop you from buying a bad deal.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it comes down to the underwriting, like you said earlier. Like if it's just finding the formula, finding the rate of return that you want, and the type of property, and the budget, and all that, and just putting it into a formula, and going out and finding it.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Awesome. Well, right on, John. I really appreciate your time, man. For those that want to connect with you and learn more about you and what you do, how can they do that?
My strongest recommendation is just go straight to strsearch.com. And the reason I say go to the website and not Instagram or email or something like that is because on our website, we have a step by step course on how to understand Airbnb data 100% free. You don't even have to put your email in. You can just start watching it. After I found 120 plus properties, I sat down and created a step by step guide. So strsearch.com is the place to go. Once you start there, you can start learning. And if you want to reach out, you will very easily be able to figure out how to reach out to me from there. Okay. So that's the place to go.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, definitely go check that out. And as always, make sure you check out the links in the description below. And if you like money and you like real estate, hit that subscribe button because this is the show for you. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.